In this episode, we're taking a look at what was, at the time of its release, the biggest selling album of all time. Now it's mainly known for the drama surrounding it. We're giving Fleetwood Mac's legendary album Rumours a closer look. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Dean Legiro here with Eric Kuber, fresh, relaxed, reinvigorated
from my
big
vacation. My big DC trip, yes.
Eric's big day out.
Very nice weekend. Washington, D.C. Brutally hot, but we stayed indoors with all the museums, so
yeah,
had a great time. Yeah.
And plenty of indoor activities when the weather, when you step outside and you start to melt, that's time for indoor activities. It's like,
well, we had
or even just sitting in a chair with the fan and AC on.
Took big advantage of the pool on the roof of the hotel, but even there, it was like you step onto the concrete.
A pool on the roof puts you that much closer to the sun.
To the sun, yeah.
Which made that just like
needless to say, I was in the shade the whole time. I was
like, water.
There were plenty of spots on up there with umbrellas, and I was sitting off to the side in the shade where Kelly was getting all her sun in. So
nice. Well, wherever you are, if you're sunbathing, if you're in a cooler climate, check us out each week. You can find a whole back catalog of extra episodes where we talk about the greatest, what we feel is the greatest. I need to always kind of preface that. What we feel is the greatest in music and movie podcasting. So find us on social media, 3324 Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Do you think when people see like the 33/24, do you think people know what that means? Or do you think they think it's a fraction? Or I was just wondering, just before we went on, I was just wondering about, I'm like, do people think it's like a fraction, like 33/24
I don't know.
of something is it too clever?
Well, I know when we first rolled it out. What are you thinking of changing the name?
No, absolutely not. We've come too far to turn back now.
That's right. I know I got some eyebrows raised when we first rolled it out. Sure. Everybody's like, what does it mean? And, everybody's like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So once you explain it, it makes perfect sense.
Maybe we should put a little definition underneath it then. If you're not sure, hit us up on social media. Or if you have a different interpretation of it, let us know what you think it means to you. Either way, it's the 3324 podcast. And we're happy and glad that you have taken time to check us out. So, we promise to do our level best to make good on our promise of bringing you the best in music and movie podcasting. So,
absolutely.
And how could we not bring the best with this album? Fleetwood Mac Rumours. Actually, Eric, I don't know if you know this. It's almost a year, pretty close to a year to the day that we did our Tusk episode. This was not planned.
Crazy.
It was not planned, but it was a year to the day. Tusk was always the album that we wanted to do. That was always probably the most obscure of the popular stuff we've done. If our popular artists that we've done, we've pretty much done their bigger albums, the Beach Boys and Beatles, and we've, Pink Floyd, we've taken like the cream of the crops usually.
Right.
But for Fleetwood Mac, we kind of subverted that because Tusk was our favorite album, but it's really kind of not really known, especially when you post it up against Rumours.
No, I mean, it's definitely, I would call it it was definitely a dark horse back in the day, I suppose, but now it's gained a lot of recognition in recent years. People are kind of, but then again, I mean, the people are still talking about Rumours too. So, trying to uncover whatever they can uncover. I mean, what more can you bleed out of this album to be sure? I mean, it's like there's just so much, but they somehow, some way, there's stories to be told, and this band is
it carries a lot of baggage, this album, and that was one of the. I think I remember you saying last year, it's like, we really don't need to do Rumours, or I was kind of like, okay, whatever, right? Like kind of all right, like Tusk was like the thing, but I think we should take a look at it. I thought I think it's important because of all that baggage. That nowadays it comes with the legend.
Right.
There was a time when that really wasn't so, meaning it was part of the story, but it wasn't the story. As the years have gone by and fights and firings and quittings and
Yeah.
reformings, it has kind of informed and kind of helped sustain the legend. But
Yeah.
back in the day, it really wasn't. It was kind of a piece of it, but it wasn't the forefront of what was going on. At least, like at the time, it wasn't like, oh, this is the way it was promoted. It was
Yeah.
just something that happened to be happening to these band members as they were recording, but it wasn't like, oh, here's like the story of it. Here's a concept album about, these
Right.
couples breaking up.
Yeah. I mean, and of us being so young, of course, when we were first exposed to it, we didn't know anything like that was going on. I mean, you might have read it maybe in Rolling Stone or Cream magazine at the time, or that, oh yeah, they broke, the couples were couples and they broke up during the making of this album. That's pretty much all you got. They
It was
didn't go
more
into
like
a lot of
reported.
detail.
It was like reported
Yeah.
in an article. Like
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't like the crux of it, although it probably had some to do with it. But yeah, now it's just taken on a life of its own. The turmoil, unfortunately, has almost overshadowed, this album. And that's the thing. It's easy to kind of, for you and I, let's be honest, to kind of dismiss this album in place of Tusk, because it's kind of become its own monster, as it were. So let's do the stats, and then we'll get into this a little bit.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit about the. We didn't talk a lot about in our Tusk episode. We're not going to be rehashing a whole lot because we really didn't touch on any of this for the most part. We said you know that story. Well, if you don't, guess what? You've got an episode to find it. So this was released in February of 1977, produced by Fleetwood Mac. My man Ken Calais and of course Richard Dashit. They're like the A team for Fleetwood Mac as far as producers and partakers in the party atmosphere that was going on there too.
Yeah,
sure.
they were there. They were certainly there, or maybe they weren't in certain cases.
Yeah, I'm sure they were. I'm sure
there,
this was,
but not there, so to speak. Yeah.
I don't know. You put Fleetwood Mac and Eagles in a room and see who could just
Oh my goodness!
Do it for the longest without falling under the table. But
I can't imagine.
There were four singles released from this album in order. "Go Your Own Way" hit number 10. Astonishingly enough, Fleetwood Mac's very first top 10 single, ever. After all the stuff that they've been through before, so turmoil is kind of like the operative word for Fleetwood Mac anyway. Without this other stuff, "Dreams" was the second single, hit number 12. I thought that did better for some reason. I thought that was I always thought that was a bigger hit than "Go Your Own Way."
Dreams?
Yeah. I always thought that was was the hit. Like that was always on the radio. I thought that was did better than "Go Your Own Way" for some reason.
Well, it is. I mean, it eventually did become, it was their first number one. No, I mean, their only number one hit? No? Or was it Rhiannon? What? Was that their?
It might have this, but there was no number ones from this because the third single was "Don't Stop," which hit number 3.
Okay.
And then the final single was "You Make Love and Fun," which hit number 9. So, number 3 was as close as they came with this, but it hit number 1 on the Billboard charts. The album hit number 1.
Yeah.
20 times platinum. I don't know if that's the biggest one we've talked about. It sold so much that it has a different designation, which is called the diamond status.
Within what was that? Within I think only a matter of months, right?
Well, within the first
debuted.
within the first month, it sold 10 million.
That's insane.
In the first month, it sold 10 million. By 1980, it sold another 3 million. It sold 13 million.
Yeah.
So that's just insanity.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? So this band is already out there. It's like people have experienced this version of Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, but
with the White Album, I mean, to sell 10 million copies out of the gate, how do people know what they're buying? I mean, they had
what
to
was
have
going
experienced
on.
The band, maybe seen them live. They've already toured extensively.
I'm going to say that's they did tour extensively, but I don't know what it's not like Fleetwood Mac before this, right? So just a little prehistory, right? Mm-hmm. Fleetwood Mac was a blues band formed in the late 60s. A la what Clapton was doing with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and they kind of, Mick Fleetwood and John McVie kind of split off, we're going to do a traditional blues kind of band, and they got Peter Green, and that was like the thing. It was like really like down and dirty blues
British blues.
playing. Yeah, the
Right.
British blues scene, and they were really the purveyors of it. But as as people started to quit and they would get new members in, like the band would radically change, but not because of like not with intention. Like there was let's see. By the time Buckingham and Nicks joined in 1975, it would have been it was the 9th lineup in 8 years. So the group changed more times than they were for the in fewer years than they were around for, right? 9 lineup changes in 8 years. So you're actually changing less than once, more than once a year. You're changing lineup. So, Peter Green would leave. Jeremy Spencer was like the second guitarist, and Danny Kerwin. So, and then they would leave. And then they're in California, so they get this guy Bob Welch. They just get him. They invite him to join because they needed somebody.
Yeah, that
not
was
because we're looking at a new
thing.
direction, right? It's kind of like let's go to the street and see who. Literally, it wasn't an intention, because then all of a sudden you've got this guy from California with a bunch of British blues artists that gives you something different.
Yeah, it was a fresh sound, and I think Mick Fleetwood was always looking for. Like, he was the experimenter. I think he was always had an ear for something fresh, something different. And we can't discount Christine McVie, who was already in the band at this point, married to John McVie, bass player. So she added her own version of a sort of a soulful blues type of thing, sort of, blue-eyed soul a little bit. But they were a band of used to improvisation. They were used to, working, the sound from the ground up kind of thing, recording in the studio, pretty much live, I guess.
Yeah. Kind of a band of misfits, though, just from the the literal like revolving door of members does not give you any stability. You've got people coming and going.
Yeah, for various reasons. Yeah.
But they're not. It's not like they recruited blues players to replace blues players. It's like the blues players left, and then they got
anybody.
Yeah, they got
free for all. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly. It was like which would become Mick Fleetwood's aesthetic of anything to keep the band going. Like we'll put anybody in to keep it going, and that was Fleetwood Mac's legacy. I mean, 9 albums in, they had 9 albums under their belt before Buckingham and Nicks joined.
Right.
Of plodding along, of literally, I mean, I'm not saying the stuff was no good, but it was directionless. Because each album, you didn't know who was going to be on it.
Each album was a kind of a different thing. You got this sort of laid back, sort of, very, very breezy type of stuff with Bob Welch. And, then, going further back, those were interesting times. I like the stuff with Peter Green myself. When they first started out, Peter Green was just a great guitar player, phenomenal songwriter. So they had something there, but those intervening years, 73, 74, like right before Buckingham Nicks, it was just kind of dry, kind of just
meandering.
They weren't, it just wasn't, and then here comes this young couple, that basically they needed another guitar player at this point, because Bob Welch had just left.
Well, they hadn't. Well,
right.
Roll back a little bit is, Mick Fleetwood was at Sound City looking for studios to record in. Yeah. So they play him a demo, like, oh, here, let's play you some music so you can hear how great stuff is recorded here. So they pull up Buckingham Nicks' solo album, and Buckingham Nicks were a duo that was destined for obscurity. They literally were getting dropped or had gotten dropped by their label. So they had one album. And Mick Fleetwood, that sounds really great. And he was kind of impressed with the guitar playing, but was not in need yet, right? It was still like, oh, we're looking for studios. Then Bob Welch, pounds the pavement and is like, oh, who is that guy? What was that song? What was that record? So they approached Lindsey Buckingham, and he says, yeah, I'll do it. But you got to take my girlfriend too.
That's right. Package deal.
And they were already kind of almost on the outs already. So that was kind of a really, interesting thing that he did. I mean, he could have just cut bait, right? And just said, okay, bye.
That's true.
I'm going to chase the big time. But he brought her along, which would turn this group on its head.
I think whatever was going on personally between them, it was always understood that even at their worst, the music was, when they got together to work, they were consummate professionals, and that's in that aspect. They, from what I understand, they rarely fought while they were working together,
Mhm.
writing, building songs, together and that kind of thing. I mean, the occasional disagreement, I'm sure, but nothing to the extent of when they, weren't working, dealing with their personal stuff. Now, to go, I guess we need to go a little further back there and talk about that as well. Lindsay, they were both, very young. I guess they met,
In high
very
school.
young in high school. They were in a band called Fritz, with a fellow guitar player named Waddy Wattel was one of their great friends, and so they, and I think Lindsay was the bass player of that group. Am I wrong about that, or
You might, I think so. I think you're
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Um,
So I think he
and then they
started out
struck
that
out on
way,
their
right?
own.
Right, and they struck out on their own, and Stevie was like, taking odd jobs as a waitress and things like that, cleaning houses
doing
to
whatever.
support them, because they were destitute. They were really on, on the skids, and Lindsay would stay home and work up his material, and Stevie was more happy to just support them both,
Mhm.
but becoming a blossoming songwriter in her own right, so hard times for sure. And then I don't know exactly what the moment was, or what it was that actually drove them apart. It's not really known, like what
Yeah,
exactly was the catalyst for them to break up or to have these
yeah.
problems.
But
Like
the
this,
the way it's
you know,
told is that she left him is
okay,
kind of the thing, and
yeah,
it was very difficult. If you haven't heard the Buckingham Nicks album, I don't think it's on Spotify. You need to find it. Go on YouTube. I'm sure
oh,
there's
it's
YouTube rips
amazing,
of the
yeah,
entire album. It is an incredible album, criminally underrated or not even rated because they never got the opportunity. But you want to hear, like, basically they took their sound and transplanted it, like literally did a transplant right into Fleetwood Mac. Like they
yeah,
literally shot what they were doing into Fleetwood Mac without really changing.
that's right.
But what it did is it changed Fleetwood Mac.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't come into the group and adapt to what Fleetwood Mac was doing. They came into the group and
To
kind of
adapt to Buckingham Nicks,
said, here's
yeah,
what we're bringing to the table. And it
yeah,
upped. Christine McVie ended up upping her game. She's a very consistent songwriter, but her
right.
songs got better.
They did, and
They're always very love about love and very positive, but
right.
they got more tuneful and they got better arranged and just better
And we have
written.
to credit Mr. Buckingham for that, because as Mick Fleetwood said, yeah, we were used to do, just writing, improvising, like I said before, like just cutting the songs live in the studio, whatever they worked up. Lindsay had a sense of knowing how to make an album. Apparently, he had that production sense already, and they were just starting out. So so he had that flair for working within the studio and using the studio as we always say, as an instrument, and very
Yeah, and
much
him
inspired by Brian Wilson and
him and John McVie
yeah,
clashed more than a few times, especially in the beginning, because Lindsay would be very hands on, and John
yeah.
McVie famously said, "Listen, I'm the Mac in Fleetwood Mac." Like I'm the bass player, like kind of
Yeah.
like trying to put like don't
Don't
forget you're the hot shot with all the ideas, but don't forget, like I'm the Mac, and in this
right.
band we're the founders.
That's
but
right.
but in the end they both would agree that the results they achieved were beneficial and positive. So
Yeah.
yeah, he brought that basically someone that would start to steer the ship. Really, that's what it was, and that's what they needed. So
And
they
that's what
come
they
out
needed.
with what's called
Yeah.
the White Album, which it took over a year before it hit number one. So it came out not too much fanfare, but they worked their tails off touring and spreading the
Mhm.
message, and eventually 58 weeks later it finally hit number one. And it was so you could call that a minor success. If it takes a year to hit number one,
Yeah.
it wasn't a sensation right from the jump. It was kind of like, okay, let's do this. But and you can hear it's got a rough
To be
sound
fair,
to it when you compare it to
who knew
Rumors.
who let's be
Yeah.
fair. Like, who knew Fleetwood Mac at that point? I guess only
Exactly.
the purists would know.
And they were probably pissed off.
They were probably the ones saying, "Well, what is this? This California crap. Like,
Yeah.
I want the blues." Yeah. So Fleetwood, they did. I guess they had to pay those dues to get known.
Yeah, they really got behind it and really just toured
or
it,
renowned.
got out there. And so for all intents and purposes, even though Fleetwood Mac was around for 9 years. This is like the debut album of a band. I mean, you consider this a debut album because this is a total reset. Even from even though Bob Welch is California, he had more, like you said, a breezy, laid back style.
Yeah.
This was more kind of rock, pop, really smart. And then you bring in another female vocalist into the mix. So you're not just replacing Bob Welch one for one, which you do, but then you're also bringing in you're bringing in a third voice, which now just kind of increases your harmony, potential for that kind of songwriting or that kind of singing. So that's going to enhance Christine McVie's stuff if you got two people behind her as well. And her and Lindsey Buckingham got on famously. So he would sing, he would trade lead vocals and lead lines with her. So
he brought a sense of harmony to the band for sure. Yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, having the three voices singing simultaneously is an amazing thing to hear. For a band that's just basically used to having one singer,
at a time. Yeah. Or someone going ooh and ah in the back.
Right. Like
this kind of brought
Christine McVie. That would, she brought that, but yeah.
And it's because Mick Fleetwood and John McVie don't really do anything. So it's just kind of like very, very, very kind of bare bones, very sparse sounding band. Now you've got this fuller sound that you're coming in. And you're bringing in someone that Lindsey Buckingham, that's a studio hound and overlaying and dubbing and all that kind of stuff. So it really kind of brought a totally different sheen to Fleetwood Mac. And you really hear it on Rumours. If you listen to the White Album, you listen to Rumours, it's got a sound that's unlike anything though. I was just listening to it again and I was cranking it. I'm like, geez, it's one of those albums that you're going to take complete for granted. It's in everybody's collection probably, but it probably doesn't get listened to enough because it's Rumours. It's like, okay, I know Dreams and I know Go Your Own Way, hear it on the radio all the time, but
if it is listened to, it's listened to because it might have a more sense of nostalgia or taking you back to something, during that summer, but who's listening to the production of Rumours? I mean, like you say, people do take this album for granted, I think. And it's one of the most well-produced albums ever made.
Yeah, it's just got a great sound. The original working title was Yesterday's Gone, which is a lyric from Don't Stop by Christine McVie. And Christine McVie and John McVie had broken up. So Christine McVie was fooling around with, I don't know, one of the stage crew or whatever, roadie crew. Buckingham and Nix were breaking up. Mick Fleetwood was breaking up with his wife, even though his wife's not a part of the band. But there was all this turmoil going on, which was fodder for songwriter. What's that? Yeah.
Yeah, she was cheating on him with his best friend, apparently.
Wasn't Mick Fleetwood married to
Jenny Boyd,
Pattie Boyd's sister, which is George Harrison's wife that he pined over?
Eric Clapton stole from George Harrison. So there's all this.
Do they all just go into a room and put their room keys into a bowl? It sounds like just a swingers club.
It's a British thing, man. I don't know.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I guess so. It's like a lot of like as Clapton even said, when he was talking about George Harrison, it's like there's a lot of swapping going on back in the day. And okay,
there it was. So Fleetwood Mac had certainly had their share. And then they had that, they had these breakups, which are, the famous story, but at the time, those were real raw. Now you look at it as, it's a soap opera thing, and you can kind of detach from it.
Yeah.
But at the time, these were real raw emotions, and having to go to work with somebody, that broke up with you or that you broke up with. Usually, when you break up with someone, you don't see them anymore.
Right. That's right.
You end that. That's the point of breaking up, is you end it. But in this case, there was a business concern that these 5 people were involved in that. And it's not like it was the Fleetwood Mac of yore where they probably could have cycled out the members. Now they have a number 1 album. There's expectations, there's hits. They've been put on a path that they can't kind of really get out of. And that's where Rumours comes to the forefront.
Very striking contrast. We keep bringing it up, but it's like, if you stubbed your toe, you got, I left the band, I left Fleetwood Mac, or, that's all you needed to do. Like,
there's even a phony Fleetwood Mac touring for a while. One of the managers was like, had a second group going around, call themselves Fleetwood Mac. So their history is already quite messy. They didn't really need this.
No.
But I guess that's the trade-off. They got monumental superstardom at a cost of having this kind of this story behind the album. And it is true. I mean, they were breaking up, but The music that came out of it, is probably, probably some of the best music, right? Is when when there is turmoil and there's conflict.
Yeah.
That's when that's when your emotions kind of are rubbed raw. And that's when that stuff comes to the forefront. And some of it wasn't pleasant for, like in Go Your Own Way,
Well, lyrically, I think that's the case. But
Yeah.
I think musically speaking, to me, it's a very bright album. I mean, it's weird. It's not like maudlin, sort of like, oh, when we broke up. So, much of that would appear on Tusk, actually. So it's almost like we talked about, like the day after they realized that all this, the big party is over now, that, whatever. If this is like the success of Rumors is the party, right? And we're celebrating the fact that we're all broken up and we made this tremendous piece of work here. But then the next day they go back and we realize we got to do this, so
the production absolutely betrays the lyrical content. Like,
it sure does.
It's bright, it's sunny, and the songs are catchy. But like
That's
I said,
right.
In Go Your Own Way, Lindsey Buckingham's like packing up, shacking up is all you want to do. And Stevie Nicks got pissed off. She's like, you're making people think that I slept around with a bunch of people, and that's not true. And she's like, you need to change that lyric. He's like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So every time he would sing that song, she would get pissed off because it's like,
well, I think Lindsey
putting your dirty laundry out there, right?
Yeah, Lindsey he took it the hardest, I think.
He did.
He did.
I didn't realize that.
He's brutal. He's very brutal. He
was hurt.
He was hurt, and he just never lived. He just never let her live it down. Like she just, she got the brunt. And there are songs on the album. Yes, we broke up, but it's also talking about moving on. Right? There's a positive spin on some of the songs too. Like, okay, we're broken up, and now like let's face the next chapter in our lives. That kind of thing. Lindsey, no, he's like he's gonna go for the gut.
Secondhand News, which was inspired by Jive Talkin'. That beginning part, he heard Jive Talkin' by the Bee Gees with that
guitar, right? That chugging guitar,
and he kind of like got that got into his head, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, you know what, I'm gonna kind of grab that and make it my own.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear like the contemporary. You always think people write songs in a bubble, but then you sometimes hear about artists that will hear something contemporary and be like, oh, I kind of dig that, and then they process it through their own mechanisms, and it comes out as something else. And that's what secondhand news is. When you hear that, just think about Jive Talkin' for a minute, and you'll be like, a little bit. It's got the shuffle.
I can hear it.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely there. But yeah, his stuff is a little like Never Going Back Again. That was actually about an affair he had during this with a woman. But it's still those his songs are definitely from a more of a hurt
point of
person perspective, and Stevie Nicks are more from a hopeful. It's over, but kind of a little more hopeful.
Let's move on. It's like we have to face tomorrow. Yeah.
And then Christine McVie's just always happy, even when she's fooling around with people.
The most optimistic song on the album.
Don't stop thinking about tomorrow.
That's right. Yeah.
You make love and fun with the guy she's fooling around with.
Yeah, there you go.
She just, she wears her heart on her sleeve. God bless her. She's just like,
Poor John
when she's in love, she's always happy.
Much to his chagrin, I'm sure he's probably just sitting in the corner, like,
it's like rubbing it in my face. Like I can't write I don't get to write a song. I'm the bass player. Although they did all collaborate on one song, and this is one of those groups that is individual songwriters. We talk a lot about songwriting teams when they write together. It's a common thing. Yeah. This is one of those bands where they all wrote their own songs. There's really no co-writing credit except for The Chain, which was written by all five of them, which is a lot of different songs kind of stitched together. And what's one of their most popular. It's always their concert opener.
It's a great song.
But other than that, each one kind of writes in a bubble. They kind of write their own stuff. But Lindsey Buckingham usually will help tighten things up. He did that with Dreams. Dreams was a very sparse song, but he was able to kind of pull it together with some different chord changes. And that's the thing is he says, he's always going to, it's not always easy, but he's always going to be there to help make good music. He's not going to spite somebody. He could have really tanked a lot of songs for her, but he makes them better. If you listen to her solo stuff and you listen to the stuff that
I've said it before in the Tusk episode, or I think I might have said it in Lindsey when we talking about his latest album. Nobody can make her songs sound better than he can. To this day, I believe they made such beautiful music together. And then Christine McVie too, the collaboration with her, like, you know, he puts his own, but it's different. It's a different vibe, a different feel. And, you know, they click together, but, you know, musically speaking, I think with
very
Stevie,
simpatico.
with Stevie, he understands where she's coming from, and he knows exactly what to do there. Like those little brush strokes, those flares that he puts in her songs.
Reference the song "I Don't Want to Know" if you want to hear just a great duet vocal. Wow, it's one of my favorite songs off the album because it's a punchy song, and it kind of gives you a glimpse of the Buckingham Nicks era, but even better sounding. You know, the Buckingham Nicks album was a little kind of rough around the edges just because it probably wasn't a lot of money spent on it. Yeah, but you put it into Rumors and they do "I Don't Want to Know." I have a version somewhere, I forget, it's like a bootleg or something, without any of the instrumentation. It's just the vocal. Wow, it's just great.
It was a song from that period, wasn't it? It was like written in
they brought like what would have been their second album. They brought that material forward with them, and you know, in remnants in one way or another. More so on the White Album, they had
Crystal
recycled some songs. So just a great. And you know what I was thinking about, and this is the thing: is what is there new to discover about this album? It's funny because I was thinking about it over the past couple of days. I'm like, well, why did people buy 10 million copies in 1 month?
Yeah.
Right. What could have possessed all these people all of a sudden to grab this?
Yeah.
And one thing I thought about is, and I'll ask you the question, before Fleetwood Mac, before they burst onto the scene, who were the two main artists of the California sound? And we talk about it a lot. Who were the two main?
Eagles for sure. And
a female artist, perhaps?
Linda Ronstadt,
right?
Yeah.
They were the two big flag bearers, standard bearers of the California sound.
Yeah.
In Fleetwood Mac, you basically get the Eagles and Linda Ronstadt in one unit.
That's true. That's
right. I mean,
that's a good point.
Obviously, Stevie Nicks is not on the caliber of Linda Ronstadt, but you're getting the Eagles sound, which people loved, and they were coming off of Hotel California. I mean, they were in the middle of their own, home run cycle, and Linda Ronstadt was unstoppable at the time. Then you get this band from California that's kind of a combination of both.
Yeah. Yeah, you get that dynamic.
I don't know. Maybe I was trying to like think about like what would possess all these people to do this.
What other groups
the other album wasn't gangbusters. It hit number one, but it wasn't like, you know.
Yeah, but it just took that time for people to get to know them, get to feel, you know. And let's examine some of the groups that were who you know. We had Mamas and the Papas, maybe. I mean, you had, you know, women, and there weren't that many groups that incorporated both and had those tight harmonies and musically very, you know, dense and rich. Yeah, Fleetwood Mac was a force to be reckoned with for sure.
Yeah, I think people were just ready for that. You know, that. So, you know, like I said, you know, it's not slick, but it's a really greatly produced album. So it's really it's easy and enjoyable to listen to. Even the slower stuff like "Oh Daddy" and some of that atmospheric stuff like "Gold Dust Woman."
Yeah,
and you could still dig your teeth in. You could still sink your teeth in
just the right amount of experimentation on there. I think there's just because, you know me, I'm the weird guy. I love that kind of stuff. But, you know, songs like "Gold Dust Woman" and it just the right amount of peppering of just those little like things that are just make it that much weirder than just say Dreams or, you know,
pop all the time.
Right. You know, you're bringing in sitars and he's playing like the dobro and he's in like this different instruments, you know,
and they're howling and screeching and just like, all kinds of different things.
Percussion.
They weren't afraid to go there, just much like the Eagles would throw in a strange song on their album. Like all of them weren't like all the albums weren't. Yeah, exactly. Like they would just kind of do those things just to kind of put it in there and just kind of remind people, okay, it's not all just pop music. We can kind of go a little different. Songbird was just a beautiful song by Christine McVie. They actually recorded it in a concert hall because they, you know, the producers felt like this, this needed something special. It needed an arrangement to it that, you know, a sparse arrangement, albeit, but just something special about it. So they got a piano, and I think they brought her roses, and she went and sat at the piano and performed it.
Yeah, the whole route. I mean,
and you just have a little acoustic guitar there, you know, I think just supporting it.
Yeah.
And that's it. You know, so not everything was layered productions and all that. They showed that they can do it all.
But when they
Because
did
you
layer
had three
those,
you had three tools, you had three players
yeah.
that can bring different things to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Lindsey Buckingham always, not on this album, you would see it on Tusk. He would start to bring the quirk, and that's what he became known for.
Yeah.
You know, Stevie Nicks would bring the hits, and Christine McVie would bring the love songs. You know, that was kind of like, so there was something there for everybody, and that's what filled me. I'm not necessarily a Stevie Nicks fan, but I like Fleetwood Mac because of what Lindsey Buckingham will bring to it and bring to the other songwriters' music as well, right? And
no
what
doubt.
enhancements he brings.
3 distinct personalities music-wise, but then to have him come in and just wrangle it all together and just make something cohesive out of it, even when they're not cohesive in their minds, or they're certainly not, you know, they don't choose to hang out with one another, or you know, at this point, but the professionalism is what gets me. And like I said, you still got some of the greatest music ever produced on these albums, and it's just a shame that joy and that exuberance isn't shared collectively throughout the band as you know, and they don't treat it more like a family. I know Mick Fleetwood would like to think that that's the case.
Yeah,
and I think
he's always
like
an eternal optimist.
Yeah, he's always the, you know, trying to they call him the big daddy, right? He's trying to like, you know, wrangle everybody in, and like, oh, you know, but he's trying to be the negotiator, and, you know, between them, you know, but he gets involved in this stuff himself. Like, you know, he ended up having an affair with Stevie Nicks at one point, and we didn't know that until his book came out.
Much longer. Yeah, much later.
Yeah, that book that came out, I think, was the late 80s, and that was a shocker. I was like, wow, you know. So every now and again you get these revelations, you know, and it's just, who would have thought? Who would have thought? Like, you just looking at the album cover, the inside sleeve of this thing, you had no idea that these people broke up. They're standing around, they're laughing, they're smiling. It doesn't really project that sense of heartbreak to me, like, both musically and, you know, just the aesthetic of the album. It just doesn't represent that to me. I don't know what it, but Tusk, yeah, certainly, because it's just weird, and you know, so of course it goes off in a whole new direction, but yeah, Rumors in itself, like, I just don't get that, the vibe, or at least, or, you know, when I was young at the time and I had it and I listened to it for the very first time, it's like, I had no idea these people were even.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the magic of it, is like we said earlier, like these great pop rock songs, but dealing with these subject matter that is, you know, none of the songs are really happy songs,
right?
You know.
Because you and I mean,
but they all, but you could listen to I Don't Want to Know and think it's like this bouncy pop song.
Yeah, you and I. Well, we both pretty much said that we at first we didn't really pay much attention to lyrics, and music was always the first. If it sounded good, then you go back and you listen, and like, wow, wait a minute, the lyrics don't really you know, match that.
Yeah,
you know, like, it's hard, but you know, that's the contrast. That's the hook that gets you in. And I guess that's, you know, a lot of people relate to this album in that sense. I think, you know, I'd rather, it's hard to write a happy song. It really, I think lyrically, I think the people will always say
Good Day Sunshine.
People will always say that it's harder to write a happy song or a song about, you know, without it coming off, you know, seeming, you know, cheesy or sort of, you know, cringy or whatever. I mean, you can't help but feel, and I know the best of the best have written songs like that, and have always been like, it's one of the worst songs I ever wrote, you know. But we wouldn't think so. But, you know, it's you know.
It's interesting statistic. We said at the beginning that it sold 10 million in the first month, and it sold 13 million by 1980.
Yeah. So
basically it sold like another 3 million in like in the 2 or 2.5 years after that.
Right.
Well, in between, 1979, Tusk came out, and it only sold 2 million copies. So Rumors still outsold Tusk.
Yeah.
Years after it came out, from 1980, it was still selling like major copies, and then Tusk comes out, which was considered basically a failure at the time.
Yeah,
because it only sold 2 million, and how could you not have that hang around your neck when the first month of a release you sold 10 million, which was unheard of.
Yeah,
and then your next one only sells 2 million.
Yeah.
So
I
you
mean, it
can
was
understand where the record company like, yeah,
right. But it was a bold choice, and I'll defend it to this day. Like I will always say, artistically speaking, it's the album they needed to make. From that standpoint, at least they got one out there that stands apart from the
yeah,
rest. And then they went back to the kind of formula with Mirage
yeah, a
in
little bit.
'82, a little bit,
Although
but still had
you can't
those.
really go back. It's just you start
But
just
still had some
making
of those
music.
flourishes, right? It's still,
Yeah,
Lindsay was always doing that quirky stuff. So
yeah, he
always,
couldn't go back after that. And once he
no,
started that
no,
on that path, that was kind of his trajectory. But on Rumors, he's a straight up kind of acoustic guitar playing. And that was another thing too, is a song like Never Going Back Again is kind of taken for granted.
yeah,
And all these years, people didn't realize that that was just him playing one guitar. And it wasn't until recently that he's gotten like all the accolades for playing stuff like this. And it was like, back
yeah.
then it was just taken for granted as like just, oh, it's like an acoustic guitar with this guy singing, but not really
Because there
respecting
were
the
a million
virtuosity,
people.
the virtuoso performance.
Right.
Of it.
Well, there was a lot of people like that at that time too. Don't forget, you had a lot of the troubadours out there, singer, songwriter, guitar players. I mean, yeah, everybody was playing guitar. But he was experimenting with more than that. I think. And I think that's the reason why. Like, now I know. That answers my own question as to why he was experimenting with less guitar in like the '80s with like Go Insane and things like that, when he was playing a lot more keyboards and weird sounds and that kind of thing. So, he kind of stepped away from it. I mean, the guitar was there, but it was layered in. It was like just
it was definitely more studio producing and less
right. Exactly. Yeah.
guitar, bass, drums, keyboard type stuff. It was he definitely kind of embraced that kind of floor. He was already a guitar player, so it's like, okay, well, what do I do next? Well, let me learn how to produce, and let me learn how to do the studio techniques and all that kind of stuff, which he heavily embraced, and then would bring to his solo stuff and the stuff with Fleetwood Mac. There was a song that did not make it onto the album because it was too long. So Stevie Nicks had a song called Silver Springs, and they had the album arranged, and it's like, we can't put Silver Springs on the album because it's too long of a song based on what we already have. So we got to drop it, and you got to do something else, which would end up being I Don't Want to Know, because she was kind of pissed. She's like, "Why? This is not fair. I don't want to be on the album with only 2 songwriting credits." So she, they did I Don't Want to Know, and they stuck that in because it's a relatively short song, and it could fit. Again, we're talking about the time constraints of an LP.
Yeah.
And it was relegated. I believe it might have been a B-side to like Go Your Own Way, or one of the, it got a minor release on the flip side, but not as a part of the album.
Yeah.
It would rear its ugly head when Fleetwood Mac reformed and I'm glad it didn't. I'm actually glad it didn't make it onto the album, because I think it would have tilted it towards more of a somber tone. Okay. I think there's just enough of those slow songs in there to, you take out I Don't Want to Know and you put in Silver Springs. Now you've got like Oh Daddy, Gold Dust Woman, Songbird. You got a lot of this down tempo stuff, so I think it was a good idea to kind of leave it off. But
even Never Going Back Again is a little bit.
Yeah. And even that is slow too. So it kind of, I think it would have changed the tone of the album a little bit.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
So they reformed 95, 96, 97, somewhere around there. And they do that, the tour was called The Dance, and they reformed, and she brought out Silver Springs. I think it's probably one of her best vocal performances ever.
Yeah.
On that version, it's actually better than the recorded version. And she put Lindsey Buckingham on blast during that song. She if there was anything that he, for all the times that he played Go Your Own Way and she didn't like it, you could tell she let him have it with those lyrics.
Yeah.
And I get chills every time I watch that performance, because she is, you'll never get away from the sound of the woman, and she is singing it right at him.
Right.
She's not looking at the audience. You can go watch the video on YouTube. Maybe we'll link it.
Yeah.
She's looking at him, and she's like laying it down somewhat 20 years later, that this still isn't over. That like there's still those feelings that she could deliver it like that. In the way that she did. It was so the end of the song was so intense,
That was
I could have loved you, but you wouldn't let me. All those, all the stuff that she had kind of pent up that was a little bit darker was in that song
yeah.
at the end. And
That album in itself, when it came out, that live album
Mhm.
wasn't just, you can't dismiss it. It wasn't just a throwaway release or just a greatest hits. Oh, we're just, whatever. That was a special thing.
Yeah.
They actually, I mean, like you say, the performances on that record, it was impeccable. I think the whole performance, I would argue the entire concert is great. Every single version, I think, of course, that's when Lindsay pulled out the Big Love with just the acoustic. That was the first time
then he
you
would
heard
do it to
that.
death.
But he also did, his another version of the slow version of Go Insane,
to death,
which is not on the album itself, but it appeared as B-side of something else. But yeah, I mean, I would, like I said, I would argue that every performance is fantastic on that record, and it really, I mean, Fleetwood Mac were alive again. Everything came flooding back. The experience, all the drama, all those things just came, and they
kind of survived it. Like, that was the thing is, he got, Lindsey Buckingham got the boot. Mick Fleetwood does what he does. He grabs the closest people available and starts filling slots, and they kind of,
right. And then
it got to the point where Stevie Nicks left as well, and they replaced her, and then it was kind of like it went dormant, and then they reformed for Bill Clinton's 92 inauguration or whatever. He asked them to reform, and that kind of got everybody on speaking terms again. And I guess it's a blessing and a curse, Rumors, right? Because it was so popular that it allowed them to do things that they wanted, like Tusk, and and have solo careers. So there's the blessing. The curse is that they're always going to be known as the bickering, the fighting, the breaking up, the relationships. The soap opera aspects of it. It wasn't really tawdry stuff, but it was just a lot of acrimony and
this just isn't stuff that's being written about them either. This is stuff that they just play right into.
They still talk, yeah.
They play right into it, and it's almost like they're feeding this to the the public. Almost, it's like you might as well just have a reality show. Honestly, I mean, you just put it out there like that. Well, I'm surprised they didn't. Especially when they, what I think the closest thing to that was the documentary about the making of the Say You Will album.
Because they had cameras everywhere for that.
They had cameras everywhere, and there was that bickering. You see it. It's like, and I was really shocked by it because I was just like, really, after all this time, you see Stevie Nicks like yelling at, like, "Come on, Lindsay," and he's sitting there crying, and it's like it's like wow, because they really played into the multimedia thing. I think at that point, Lindsay, I think he hams it up, man. I think he knows what he's doing there. Like I honestly think that they're both in that sort of diva stage where they eat it up and they just love putting that stuff out there. And it's a shame, but they do what they do. I guess that keeps them alive.
It's a fine line between relevant and becoming like a parody.
Yeah.
Like at some point you kind of have to, I guess what it is they're embracing their legacy.
Yeah.
Right. They're not kind of like, oh, don't ask them about their relationships, like in an interview or something. It's like, no, they'll it's unfortunately it's as much a part of them as their music, and I just don't want the music to be overshadowed. That's why I think we needed to do this episode.
It's a shame.
Is that the music there should be listened to, and I can listen to it and not have to be thinking about, whether or not they're breaking up, because I wasn't a part of it. So yeah, it informs some of the music, but I could just sit there and listen to this as just a spectacular album, because that's what it was. People were, like I said, people weren't grabbing this. Oh, this is the breakup album or whatever. It was just I mean, it defies logic. A lot of critics and music reviewers don't know why this album did so well.
Yeah. I mean, it was critically acclaimed. You look at it now, it's like 5 stars across the board. A perfect album. The absolute, like, I don't remember seeing anything having that sense of perfection, like ratings, like critically of like, all the great critics back in the day, Rolling Stone, and, you see like A+. It's a, what is it about this album, or is it that makes it that perfect, that great? I don't know. I don't know the answer to it. I mean, it really, but it is a perfect album if you listen to it, and
it's just got some magic to it.
every song
that's
is
what it
great.
is. You
There's
can't
no filler. Yep.
If it defies explanation, then it's got to be magic. Honestly, right? There's got to be something in the grooves that we can't put into words.
Yeah.
But it's there when you listen to it. And when you I don't really put this album on that much, but for this episode I listened to it a bunch. I'm like, wow, like I forget, because like you said, it's easy to kind of throw this one to the side because everybody's got it in their collection or is aware of it, but because of the the story of it, not because of the music, and the music is getting sidelined. I think it's important to kind of just put this on and listen to it for that. And this was during their famous, drug fueled, their drug fueled binges too. They weren't the most
big time.
Yeah, they weren't the most sober doing this. Like one of the owners of the record plant, the studio where they recorded, said, the band. This is a quote: the band would come in at 7 at night, have a big feast, party till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then when they were so whacked out they couldn't do anything, they'd start recording.
That's when they started recording. Yeah.
So it was like it was Eagles. I don't know if it was Eagles level debauchery, but all the that era in California in the 70s was just drug fueled excess.
Mm-hmm.
And just a nonstop party. So the fact that they were able to kind of pull it together, the fact that them and the Eagles came out on the other side as well from that, with no like drug casualties, so to speak.
Yeah.
Also speaks for itself. Lindsey Buckingham kind of distances himself from that now. He doesn't really acknowledge. Stevie Nicks absolutely does. She's like, oh, coke, she had to go into rehab and this and the other thing. But that part they really downplay. Lindsey Buckingham will be very evasive in interviews about that.
Mm-hmm.
But he'll talk about how much acrimony there was between him and Stevie Nicks. But when they talk about the other thing, he kind of backs away from it a little bit, kind of, downplays. Yeah, it was,
nobody likes to really, I guess, I don't know. There is that sense, that point in time where people like, they have their regrets. They,
Mm-hmm.
I like when people admit their demons and in the past, and now they're seeing, oh yeah, we were so like crazy back in the day, but that was California though. And I think a lot of maybe the reason that the album sold so well to begin, maybe people were privy to that, perhaps, people in California. Let's think of regions too. Like where did the album sell?
That's a good point.
Is it, so people picked up on that. Yeah. People in California were partying all over the place. I mean, so yeah, this could be the ultimate party album at that point in time, or something. We definitely identify with that.
Yeah, and maybe just for people on the East Coast, it epitomized the California lifestyle and kind of felt that way. There's not one. I couldn't find like one overriding reason that it was. It was just something that just kind of, and again, a band plucked from obscurity. It's not like they were recording like this for years and then they had their zenith, their magnum opus, like U2 or REM. It's like it's a ragtag, group of people, that they put together, and then their second album just kind of literally explodes in their face.
Right. This is amazing. Like we talked about, like this revolving door of personnel moving in and out, and like an unremarkable band for sure. For then the superstars.
Yeah, like nameless, faceless, and then this was the biggest selling album of all time. Oddly enough, would be unseated by another album that only had a one-word title, which would be Thriller.
Yeah,
from Michael Jackson. Now that that album, you can kind of pinpoint. There's a lot of things that happened with Thriller. There was the advent of MTV, right? Playing the music videos. Brought it to a whole other audience. He broke that color barrier as well on MTV. So he was one of the first black artists that was getting played. So it was that. It was the radio airplay. It was music video. It was Thriller as a long form piece of art.
Yeah.
Right. And as a video, and everybody, I remember staying home to watch the premiere of Thriller.
Yeah.
Right. And parents were watching it too, because their kids were making them watch it. So you can kind of look at Thriller and kind of parse where it came from and how it how it kind of just soaked itself into the consciousness. Michael Jackson was a big art. He was well known from the 60s as the Jackson 5, then the Jacksons, and had a solo career. So you can kind of chart Michael Jackson and say, okay, he's working towards it, and then Thriller explodes. Fleetwood Mac, you can't chart the same thing. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't, with any other huge, even Pink Floyd, we talked about Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
Not that their other albums were gangbusters, but at least they had a stable group. They were plugging away. They were working towards something, and then they achieve it. This is basically a brand new group that was around for 9 years.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So it kind of defies logic when you put it up against other great selling albums that are not greatest hits. So when you put it up against some of those other monster albums, you can see, Born in the USA, this was his pinnacle. Springsteen was working towards it, or any of those groups. You really, you can kind of look at it.
Nobody heard Stevie Nicks or Lindsey Buckingham.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
they were scrubs. They were nobodies.
That being said, I remember you getting into Law and Order, back in the day.
Which was Lindsey Buckingham's first solo album.
Right. I'm like, who the hell is Lindsey Buckingham? And you're like, Lindsey Buckingham, Fleetwood Mac. I'm like, oh, I didn't associate Lindsey Buckingham I didn't care who the group members were.
You know what? He still never forgave you for that. He's still angry over you not associating.
But that's the thing. It's one of those things. I think in full disclosure, I mean, the reason I loved that album was, hey, they were two pretty good looking chicks in this group. I was real. Obviously I was, Stevie Nicks was, every young
everybody
kid
was in love with her.
Yeah. So, and who cared about this guy with the big afro, standing next to her? I didn't know. I mean, he looked like,
looked a lot like Jeff Lynne,
or he looked like Brad Delp from Boston. He could have been any one of those guys.
That was the look back then.
The look, right? Exactly.
Was bearded, thin, and big
very
bushy
thin,
hair,
anorexically thin. I mean, it was just and wearing these like long drapey type of shirts and and it's like I didn't really care who the group members were. It was just I just loved this music. It's like wow, and it really didn't occur to me that this guy would jump out as this brilliant artist. I think you were the one who actually really steered me in that direction, because I was the big Stevie Nicks fan back in the,
you and our friend Johnny were like Team Nicks, Team Stevie.
Team Stevie all the way.
I was like Lindsay all the way.
But
we chose sides.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And, you start to appreciate those things. And most definitely, I don't know if he ever got that appreciated. I think he'd like to think not. I think over the years, he was very disgruntled about, I never got the recognition. The critics loved him, of course, but
he just wasn't commercial. He wasn't commercially successful.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, critic, darling of the critics, but that doesn't pay your bills.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't, I mean, of course, not that money was a problem. I mean, you're living off of, Fleetwood Mac. It's kind of like, you don't need to worry, but I'm sure from a personal, in a developmental standpoint, you want the crowds to love you as well, not just the critics, and not as, because then you start to doubt, well, is it because Stevie Nicks is in Fleetwood Mac that they were so popular? Like, you probably start to second guess yourself, right, in your position. And maybe Christine McVie starts to think, well, they come on all of a sudden, but I've been here for 9 years and all of a sudden we're so popular. Is it, what do I have to offer? You know what I'm saying? Like, you can start to probably second and third guess yourself from different positions, from any one of those different roles of, well, what,
I wonder what
because they were never better and never stronger than when they're with Fleetwood Mac. And he said it, Lindsey Buckingham said it the best is, the sum was greater than the parts, taking separately, they're just not as strong. It's not like, Stevie Nicks was popular, but she wasn't a knockout artist. Her stuff kind of got redundant and kind of the same type of thing. But when they would get together with Fleetwood Mac, there was something, always some special sauce there.
You always look forward to that next album. Always, I know we did. we
Yeah,
were waiting with bated breath for like Tango in
because
the
you
Night
knew it
to
was going to
come
be
out.
interesting. I knew it was going to be
Yeah.
something interesting.
Yeah.
That was the thing, is you knew no matter what, you were going to get all these different. You didn't know where it was going to lead, because they had done that left turn with Tusk, that they had the ability to kind of do different things, and they pretty much straightened out towards a straight up pop, pop trajectory after that. But still, that element was there. Of things can be a little different, and there'll be the popular stuff, but then there'll be that other stuff that people don't gravitate towards, which is usually tends to be the Buckingham stuff on those albums. It's kind of the weirder stuff, but I say that's the best stuff.
Of course. And I'm 100% agree with you today. And like, yeah, of course, now that we kind of know what we're talking about now. But or at least.
So what do you think? Any parting shots? Any last words as we wrap this up?
You mentioned Magic, this album being Magic. How did you like? What was your first? How did you get it? How did you come into? Like, how did you own it first? Did you have it on cassette, vinyl? Was it CD?
That's a good question. I mean, I know that, the album was banging around like in the local library. It was kind of like, that's like having Milk and Eggs. Having that in the library is kind of like, standard stuff.
Yeah.
I think maybe my aunt had the 8-track. So just different. It was just everywhere. Like that thing was just everywhere. You literally couldn't get away with it. Couldn't get away from it.
I distinctly remember hearing it in other people's houses.
Yeah.
Like somebody always had the album, but somehow miraculously it appeared in our record cabinet. And like you say, it's like magic, like I didn't get by this album. And I don't think it was my brother's, because I don't think
he stole another one, Matt.
I don't think he's into Fleetwood Mac. I could be wrong about that, but maybe he, whatever. But to the life of me, I don't know where it came from, but it was there. And it just like a lot of the popular albums of like ELO's Out of the Blue and some others. But yeah, where these albums came from, I have no clue.
Yeah.
But they were there. And I was fortunate to have them on vinyl.
It doesn't sound dated either. I mean, it is of the 70s, but it doesn't employ the gimmicky stuff of the 70s. And it certainly doesn't sound like anything from the 80s, because the 80s was its own sound. So does it have a classic sound? Sure. But that sound, you're kind of hearing that stuff kind of come back now, that kind of just a classic rock pop sound, not on the radio, but
do you consider
maybe just because it keeps resurfacing, that it never sounds dated?
Yeah,
because it keeps entering the charts. There was that TikTok
too.
Like a year ago with the cranberry juice and the guy on the skateboard.
Right.
It keeps resurfacing, so it's kind of like always.
And now
it's like always
reaction
there.
Videos. I was actually watching one today. This whole, I think it was like 50 kids listening all at once to The Chain, and they were all crying. By the end of the song, they're like tears are streaming down their face. They're like
they wanted to go to lunch.
No, they were loving it. They, I've seen that only once before with Time by Pink Floyd, where people were weeping.
Yeah,
people
they cry. I've seen those
they get
videos
emotional
too,
over these. And I love that. I love seeing young,
when you sit and listen,
impressionable minds today being floored by this. So because it is. I'll always refer. Like if I could get some kid to sit next to me and say, listen to this, and blow his mind, that would make me very happy. Man, hopefully, with the advent of this podcast, we're doing that.
I think just it's one of those things. It just kind of, like I said, it's and maybe that's the brilliance of them always giving interviews and talking about it, because it kind of keeps it front of mind, and people will read an interview about it that may not have seen an interview from 4 years ago. Yeah. And then they'll check it out. And this album just kind of is, it's beyond evergreen at this point.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's a part of just everything. It's like I said,
blows my mind
it's legendary
that they're still touring. Stevie Nicks is she just did a show somewhere. Like they're in their 70s, for God's sake. I mean, they're still, there's still life to be, and
they got to pull it together for one more.
I really hope
told
that
this
happens.
sad tale. We've told this sad tale many times too.
Yeah.
Put it aside. pull it together. And I think they could, because they've done it before. That as much as they don't get along, they also understand the greater good. They're one of the bands that understands the greater good.
Yeah.
For as much as they don't get along or bicker or whatever, and Buckingham, I think everybody but Stevie Nicks at this point, they're pretty much all game to go out with a bang. Like, let's finish it and be done with it and put the final stamp on it. I would love to see that, because Buckingham is, like we said, he's still in great voice. They're all still in great voice. So
if
they could
that,
pull it off. If they pulled off like the end of the road or whatever they want to call the tour, you'll pack them in, and then you sail off into the sunset.
Yeah, it's got to happen. It should happen. So
all right, see. Let us know at 3324 Podcast. Would you go see Fleetwood Mac reform with what's known as their classic lineup? Hit us up on Instagram and Facebook, 3324 Podcast. You'll find us there. Join the conversation. Let us know about it. We'd love to hear your opinion about that. Would you go see them? Are they too old? Is it too long in the tooth? Or would this be something that would be up your alley? Because maybe we'll all go together then. We'll all kind of converge and buy a bunch of tickets.
Our collective group. Yeah.
In the meantime, that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a blast. It's always a pleasure talking about some of these great albums from our past. And we're going to kind of close the book, as it were, on Fleetwood Mac. This is going to do it. Rumours is the pinnacle of their career. And it's been a blast talking about it with Eric. So for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 Podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast and on Twitter at 3324P to join the conversation.